Then we move on to 76 Ogden Place West, and then 78 Price Street. For the first application, 0 North Mountain, who will be heard on this application?
Good evening, Chairman Hoffman and members of the Zoning Board of Appeals. My name is Krista Wilson, a partner at the law firm of Marks D. Palmero. I'm here tonight along with Patty Steinschneider and Joe Locascio to present to you what we believe is a fairly straightforward request to overturn or reverse the determination, the July 2022 determination of the building inspector finding that 0 North Mountain Drive was not a buildable lot. I'm just going to give a brief overview of kind of the legal outline, then I'm going to refer to Patty. He'll get into the nuts and bolts as he often does with a nice slideshow presentation. But our request, first and foremost, is to reverse that determination, finding that this lot was not a buildable lot. And there are several good reasons for that determination to be reversed, not the least of which is that the approved and filed site plan that this lot is a part of was approved and filed by the planning board a couple weeks after the steep slope law was adopted. It was done with the intent, the knowledge, they were reviewed simultaneously with so when you had the planning board chairman, Ed Plotkin at the time, sign off on that plat, it was with the intention that all of those lots in the subdivision were buildable lots. Legally, you can't approve a subdivision unless they're buildable lots. You're not going to approve a 5-lot subdivision unless there are 5 lots to be built upon. So if you dig a little deeper into that site plan, you actually see on the filed site plan notes that are specifically geared towards this lot, saying dealing with stormwater runoff and other issues that would never have been identified had this not been intended to be a buildable lot. Patty will go through the documents and show you that. Again, the lot has also been taxed as a buildable lot since its existence, and the tax map also shows this as a separate lot. So there are several filed official documents within the village that all evidence the intent to make this a buildable lot. And we believe that those facts, in this particular case, give you a very strong basis on which to overturn the building inspector's determination. Alternatively, if you don't overturn the building inspector's determination, you're asking for what would be about a 23% variance. Use the building inspector's calculations, square footage versus Patty's. There's a couple percent difference, but for purposes of tonight, it would be a 23% variance, granting us the difference between the required minimum gross lot area and what we have, or net lot area, and what we have of 15,000, from 22 down to 15. That is about a 23% variance. And I will certainly go through, if necessary, the balancing test, which I know this board is all very, very familiar with, go through the different factors. But clearly, there are no alternative avenues for us to pursue. If we don't have the building inspector's interpretation overturned and a variance isn't granted, then you've essentially affected a taking of our property. You can't develop it. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Patty.
Before you do, may I ask you a question?
Sure.
What year was the site plan approved?
1989.
And is there a reason why that lot has not been built on for the last 30 some odd years?
I can't speak to the ownership history. Patty might have a better understanding of that.
Really. It was created and they didn't ever develop it. It was sold a couple of years ago to the person who now owns it. And she bought it as a building lot. And David is here in the audience. Trying to keep it low profile.
So it's been sold, it's been treated by the village as a building lot in terms of its tax assessed value. It's been, in terms of an arm's length transaction, it's been sold as a building lot. The planning board, a couple decades ago, actually was looking at the steep slopes law, Board of Trustees adopted it, and then the minutes reflected, the resolution reflects that they adopted that, they passed that subdivision approval, with the full knowledge of the steep slope ordinance. So,
But we don't have any of those documents.
okay,
They're village
Oh.
minutes.
It would be, just
Yeah.
following what the chair is saying. I have some concerns about the steep slope law and that degree of variance. Historically, this board has been tough on steep slope variances. I would have a different feeling if you were able to produce written documentation, not verbal documentation, that clearly shows that it was the intent of the village at the time of this, with the approval, to make an exception for this lot, for whatever reasons the village decided at that time. I know Mr. Plotkin was a very good engineer, very good civil engineer. He might have had reasons and explanations, but I don't see that. I don't have that piece of paper in front of us. Is there a way that you could provide that documentation?
we could certainly, I think Patty's presentation will touch upon a few of the official documents, certainly tie that together and through the various writings and filings, create the framework for your deliberations and ultimate
Thank
conclusion
you.
that that was the intent.
One thing we could do, you know, it's what you like, we can make the presentation. You have two other items on the agenda. I'm a block away, I've got all the minutes. So I can bring the minutes that actually clearly state that this is being approved, given the steep slopes having been in the minutes. And we can go first and then come back and you can finish up with this after you've done the minutes.
Mr. Chairman, how would you like to handle it?
I think that's fine. If you're not ready, you're not ready.
Well, I just,
Well,
I
if-
assume the village records are not what I need. But, you know, but I've got copies of them.
Well, but it's your application, you know, you're supposed to give us reasons why we should approve things. You know, and it can't be based on, you know, oral recollection. You know, it has to be harder than that.
Sure, so would it make sense then for us to let Patty move forward with his slideshow that has a lot of the documents that are submitted to this board already? And if there's a specific request for the minutes, sounds like we can get those
I can
in
go
your
back,
hands.
get them and bring them down for the end of the meeting. You can take a look at them now.
Could I propose an alternative to?
Yeah, why don't
Why don't we let items
you
2
guys
and
go
3
last?
Why don't we let items 2 and 3
Yeah.
go first, so we don't have a gap, and you could do your other,
Yeah, then there's some continuity.
Okay,
That's not a problem, as long as you can, put it back up. I have difficulties with this machine, so I bring my own laptop, and she's got it all set. So as long as she just indicated she can do that, we're good.
Joe and John and Jerry, are you guys okay
Yeah,
with that as an
that's fine.
approach?
As long as what's if it's voluminous and it needs time to be read and
Right.
considered,
Then maybe
that's
we'd rather see it
that's
the next
one thing.
month.
If let's just take a look at what it is, I'm happy
They're
to.
like a half a page. It's not voluminous. It's actually like, the next item on the agenda is this application, and you see right there, the wording is very direct. So if you're reading one paragraph from maybe 2 or 3. Yeah. And if that's what, makes people more comfortable, I
It-
think that's it.
Honestly, I
Well-
think it's your best path.
Well,
okay,
so we'll do that.
we continue.
I'm not gonna do 23% variance on steep slope. Village committed 30 years ago, is it still, maybe.
Where am I here?
Could you use?
And the next item on our agenda is 76 Ogden Place West. Will be heard in this application?
I will. Hi, I'm Liz Vanderzand. I'm the owner and the architect. But I think I might need a little, gee, so. to give you an idea of the layout of the house, this is the existing house. And this is the part of our property where we're interested in building. So it's from the end of the house to about where that tree is right now. So, as you could see from our application, we want to build an addition to the home. It's a 2-bedroom, 1.5-bath house, 4 of us. And so this planned addition would give us storage space, a primary bedroom, ensuite, et cetera. The variance that we're asking for is for about a little over 1% over the building coverage, existing building coverage, or the building coverage cap, rather. Do you want me to go through the plans, or how would you like me to do this for you? What's best say?
I think in just a general way, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, you know, more for the
Yep.
people watching than for us,
For the audience.
because it's pretty straightforward.
Okay. So, just trying to navigate it here. Okay, so. So, because of the steep slopes on the property, our gross square footage was reduced from 10,000, a little over 10,000 square feet to a net lot area of about 8,700. And obviously with that we lost some of our building coverage. Also, the lot itself is kind of a funny shape. So in order to keep within the bounds of the setbacks, which we'll go to the next page for you, keep within the bounds of the setbacks, which you can see on this drawing in green. I have the setback lines on each side of the house. To keep the extension within the lines of the setbacks, it kind of limited the planning possibilities for this area.
Right.
So while I've conformed to all of the yard setbacks and pervious coverage, obviously the building coverage is an issue. Sorry, trying to navigate the computer. Okay. Also, just to make note of it, as far as the new part of the house, the newly proposed part of the house, we're within the sky exposure plane. We're not crossing that. The older part of the house does overlap a little bit, but this end of the house here, where the proposed addition is, we're quite far from the side setback, and we're fine as far as the street frontage on the back of the property. And then to give you an idea, this area here is the new part of the house. So we'd be coming off the north end of the house, off of our living room, into a stair hall going up for the primary bedroom and down for the basement. And I've tried to keep the plan pretty compact and efficient as far as, you know, as I said, within the setbacks, while still trying to provide a comfortable living space for us. So I think, you know, mainly my feeling is that given the constraints of the site and that we have a house that's half of it's from the 1890s, built way before any of these code issues or zoning issues, and then the other part of the house, this extension, which was really one room, kind of double height living room that was added in the 60s. Ultimately, we don't really have that much living space for that footprint, which is why, you know, I'm asking now if you could consider giving us the variance for the 1+% building coverage.
Very good plans. Anyone have any questions?
No.
No, I think this is a very reasonable request. It's less than a 1% variance that we're talking about, and I move that the application be approved.
Second.
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Good luck to you.
Thank you very much.
Oh, you didn't ask for public comment? Did
Oh,
anybody else want to be heard?
I'm sorry. Is there anyone from the public that would like to be heard in this application before we close? No? Okay, thank you very much. Good to go. Thank you. And the next item is 78 Price Street. Will be heard in this application? Anybody? There was an open door and a lot of construction when I was going by.
Is the person on?
Too busy building it.
Well, they are allowed to work inside.
That's right.
Are we still, are people still
Could they
able to
be
attend
co-
by Zoom?
Yes.
Is anyone
Is anybody raising their
awaiting?
hand on-
Yeah, is 78
Is that in
Price
the waiting room?
trying to,
Okay.
excellent.
Pretty straightforward, so.
Yes. What's amazing about the one we just had is that the house was properly placed,
Yeah.
so that it wasn't non-conforming.
It's an interesting street you live on, Ogden Place.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. You're welcome.
Okay, good night.
So I suspect Price Street is not here.
It looked like someone was there on.
Yeah, it looked like,
I thought I saw,
it looked like there was a person there for a bit.
Jotan Thinker, someone was there.
um,
Got it.
Hello,
Hello. Hello.
how you doing?
Good. How are you, sir? Sorry, just having some technical difficulties here. Okay.
We can just see kind of from your mid-chest.
Yeah, I see. It's like a stock image. How do I get this video up and running here, Dad?
It looks like a Verizon truck.
That's not a compliment.
Yeah, but this is what you're sharing, Dad.
There we go.
Okay.
We see the plans.
Can you guys see our screen? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. So we're making progress here. Excellent. My name is Ronick Dacker. I'm here on behalf of 78 Price Street. I know you can probably only see a stock image there, but if you can see my screen and bear with me, I think we can get through this. So we're here to request a rear yard variance. We're looking to replace an existing dilapidated deck on the rear of the structure with a new, safer, and more useful space. So what I'm going to do is I'll switch to my next screen here, and you can get a better idea of what we're looking at in the back of the home. So the original deck that's there, it was built according to a kind of irregular property line, and I can show you that on the survey with the next page here. If it reminds for me. And as you can see, I'm scrolling. It's just taking a little time to load. The side that has our deck constructed on it has kind of a irregular property line there, and that resulted in the deck being made kind of uh, not suitable for full family gatherings, and it kind of makes it a little crowded and unsafe. Um, so now that we want to be using this space a little bit more. My grandma was staying there on her own, and there'll be more people living there now. We'd like to make it a little bit larger, replace it with brand new materials, and so we can enjoy it going forward. Um, Let me put you back on the previous screen that has the plans. And scroll down. So the variance that we are asking for is a 5 foot 7 inch variance to extend this deck out. And then as you can see on the plans here, eventually we are looking to connect it with a patio that will be on the lower half and connecting to the existing patio that's underneath the deck right now. Um, I can show you another screenshot I have here, which will let you see. Uh, uh, this is a front view of the residence, but as you can see, it's kind of surrounded by trees. Um, this will result in minimal disruption to neighbors and things with construction going on. It's kind of far removed from the road as well as their angles of view and any type of noise really. They seem to be okay with it. It looks like their houses have like kind of similar construction recently. Um, so that kind of helps the project along a little bit. I'm gonna go back now to this the plan set. Is there any thing in
Excuse
particular
me,
I can?
I don't think we actually saw the picture you were just now referring to.
Oh, really? I'm sorry. Let's see. Um, it's this so right, but they're not seeing this now on my screen. So I'm gonna pull that up for you right now. I think it's sharing a different screen.
Dan, while he does that, can you verify that the neighbors,
Hit that
the
down.
way his property is situated, there is really, the people who really would be affected, just given the way the landscaping works and everything, are his neighbors immediately to his left and right. Have they both responded that they've gotten cards and are
They
aware of
have,
this?
and we have received the affidavit of notice from the applicant.
Thank you.
And I spoke to the one on the left, who was out walking his dog, and he had no issues with the application.
Is a shot of the front of the residence coming up on your
Yes,
screen, gentlemen?
Yes.
Okay, so this is what I was trying to show you guys previously. This is the screen that kind of shows you the evergreen hedge in the back and on the left side of the home, which is where the deck will be constructed from the back side. So as you can see, like they can't really see it. Kind of keeps it away from their point of view. I can scroll back to the. Oh, and there is why it wasn't working. Okay, and I will go back to my plan set now. Can you see it, gentlemen?
We're seeing the plan now, yeah.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Perfect. Is there any other details I can provide you all that you would require at this time?
Anybody have questions? Let me just ask if there's anyone in the audience that or online that would have any questions? No? This is a variance request, really, that has to do with the way the house was originally built, out of whack with the front front property line and the side property lines. And, really, although this is about a 5-foot, 7-inch request, it's much less than that for most of the deck. This seems rather minimal to me. Everybody agree?
Yeah.
Move to close?
Second.
I move that the application be granted in accordance with the plan submitted. All in favor? That's unanimous. Good luck to you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate your time.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, did you take public comment? Did you ask for public comment?
Yes, we
Okay,
did.
sorry. Thank you.
All right. Application granted. Oh, yeah. So what he said is that
Second is the Board of Trustees minutes from the adoption of the steep slopes. And then the third one is the minutes from the planning board meeting in October, at which the subdivision of this property was granted with specific reference by the attorney representing the property owner, stating that this was compliant with the steep slopes ordinance that was just adopted. And the board concurred.
But that's objective, right? Meaning that either they were in error or that the steep slopes ordinance changed in the interim. I mean, when I say it's black and white, it's like, it's just calculation. It's,
Right.
right?
It meant the.
This is lawyers.
But read what it says. The first paragraph says, Ms. Enox, who's the attorney, submitted a revised plan which in her opinion meets all the requirements of the newly enacted steep slope ordinance. But it's not clear that it meets all the requirements of this, saying it
Right,
meets all
that's
the.
a statement, but it's not,
But then go on with the rest of the deliberation by the planning board to then took action. If they did not agree with that, then they shouldn't have taken action.
And then Mr. Dunn noted that this document should also be signed and sealed by a land surveyor. After brief discussion of the street and the general health and safety, the motion made, that was carried. But I guess the part where I'm having problems, and I'm going to address this more to the attorney than to you, Patty, if with all due respect, is there's an assertion that this meets all the requirements of the steep slope ordinance.
Right.
I don't know exactly what that means, because we're now finding that because of the steep slope ordinance, the property is short
It's
by.
undersized.
Is undersized.
Yeah.
So I don't understand how those two facts get reconciled.
This is you, sir.
So I would respond stating that the topography of the site obviously hasn't changed, or not drastically from when it was approved, right? So what was before the planning board at the time that they approved the subdivision is substantially what is currently existing on 0 North Mountain Drive now. So without knowing and seeing exactly what these specific calculations showed, it was sufficient. And I guess eventually the surveyor certified the amended October plan, which was amended from, I think, June. So they went back, the attorney and land surveyor redid everything based on the steep slope ordinance. They approved it as a, I forget how many lots this original subdivision, two-lot subdivision, based on that. So the premise is the planning board asked for a revised subdivision. They came back in October, steep slope calculations were done, and it was approved. So the intent of the planning board at the time was to approve two-lot buildable subdivision. And then if you go further, if you take these minutes and you go further and look at the filed site plan, which Patty has a slide of, it shows specific notations regarding what has to be done, not with respect to steep slopes, but with respect to other water runoff, stormwater runoff, that type of thing on this particular lot. So the contemplation, they wouldn't have gone through all those specific notes on a lot that they didn't consider buildable.
It seems that what's relevant to the discussion is that also submitted was a sheet showing calculations for the slope ordinance. So at the time, someone did some sort of calculation that apparently proved out that it was compliant with this new ordinance.
Right.
I'm assuming the ordinance hasn't changed. We're all on the same, the ordinance hasn't changed. Okay, so there's, I agree with you, the site probably hasn't changed in any dramatic way, and unless there's some work was done on it, and that the ordinance has not changed it has not changed at all. So, and then the question then was whether or not the building inspectors, your argument is that the building inspector's determination was in error.
Correct.
My guess is the building inspector is simply doing the calculation too, just the black and white calculation, and looking at the ordinance and saying, when I compare the two of them, it's not compliant. Like, again, kind of black and white.
Which suggests that now the calculation being done, it's not in conformance, because.
That's what I'm, there's
That's
two
how I read it.
calculations here.
Right. And actually, Peter, tell me if your memory, if this jogs anything in your memory.
good
I
luck.
remember when the steep slope first came, there were questions about how you do the calculation.
Absolutely.
And over time, the calculations became more regularized and
Right,
precise.
standardized, yes.
Standardized. So I guess I'm saying, right now, the fact that the attorney for the applicant at one time said the ordinance was correct and people thought it was correct, has to take a second seat to the fact that the building department is going out now and done the same calculation on the same plot using the same law, it says it's not compliance. I mean, the plot's the same, you looked at it, or somebody on your staff looked at it, it now says it's not in compliance. I mean, so I can't,
So
I don't, you know.
I would respectfully suggest that the building department does the straight-out calculation, that's its job, that's its obligation to determine technically, or by numbers, black and white numbers, does it comply with what's
Right.
there? Here, there is an incredibly important historical context under which this particular lot was approved. So unlike other, and I know you mentioned, one member mentioned that you don't typically grant variances, or you look at it very strictly with steep slope requests. Here we're saying, before you even get to whether a variance should be granted, I understand the high burden there. We're saying, in this situation, this is a pretty unique parcel that was approved almost simultaneously with steep slope ordinance, which hasn't changed. It was 3 weeks earlier. So the intention here was to allow this lot to be buildable. Whether you call it an exemption, an exception, that word or that buzzword isn't in the resolution, isn't in the minutes, doesn't have an asterisk on the site plan that's been filed. But if you look at the totality of all the filed and official documents, it would lead one to believe that this is a buildable lot, and legally has been treated as such. So in this instance, unlike maybe every other steep slope application that comes before, or property that comes before you with steep slopes on it, we're saying here, it's not the context of the historical documentation, the legal filings, the approvals that this village granted render this lot a buildable lot. You don't even have to get to the variance question.
So you're not saying that Dan did the math wrong. You're saying there's an implied grandfathering.
Yes. Yeah, the math, the numbers speak for themselves. They're not that far off when you look at it in terms of, 15,700 and something, that type of thing. But
we would also have to notice that as the application.
I believe the agenda is for, well, the notice was for the exact word, the appeal of a determination. The application was submitted as such.
Public hearing for proposed plans to, I don't think I have the official notice here. I mean, I have an agenda.
Matter to be heard concerning proposed plans to construct a new home on the vacant lot.
Yeah, that's what I've got. Okay, yeah, that's the extent of it.
So the application was submitted as an appeal for appealing the decision of the building inspector. That's the checked box or line.
First, Peter and Bruce, both of you remember acting. At the time, the steep slopes ordinance adopted was a tremendous amount of confusion. The simplest one was when someone who went to the meeting asked the board of trustees, can you tell me what the percentage is of a 45 degree angle? The answer, unanimous, each member, was 45. That person, I'm going to identify who, said, no, 45 the angle, 100%. And then one of the trustees told double the vertical angle, vertical persons. So there was a lot of confusion about how measurement would be done. Right. Michelle Bonstein at the time rejected an application that was made where someone took contours and divided up the lot so that you could see where the steep slope was, where it was flat, and calculated the area, exactly how Dan requires it done now. Building inspector in 2022. Michelle Bonstein, the building inspector at that time, rejected that. She said the right way to do it, you take the low point and the high point. got the best chair of a planning board I've ever seen. That chair of that planning board conducted this review at the same time that he was conducting a lot of the work that was done to adopt this new zone. And he felt what had been submitted met the criteria suitably for him to affix his name on that document, so that it could be filed with the county record. That chairman would not have done that if he did not have confidence.
Patty, I don't disagree with you on your assessment of Ed Plotkin's professionalism and expertise. I worked with him, not in the village, but on projects in the city that we both worked on. What I'm not sure of, and I really would like the village's attorney opinion on this issue, is, let's say in good faith, back in 1989, there was a determination that the plot conformed to the steep slope law. 33 years has passed. The land has not been built on, which raises some questions sometimes, just because it's been an abandoned, I'm using that word very, very loosely, property. It hasn't been built on, so no actions have followed that precedent. The calculations, or the way we do calculations now, are different than it was then. That's the only way you get these different answers. And now it no longer qualifies. I just don't have enough of a legal background. It's not my training to know whether that original determination would still stand.
So I think that, and I'm happy to, Lori Lee. Okay, so I'm happy to speak with Lori Lee about that. But here, I think there also is the other argument, which I haven't really discussed, but is of kind of vested rights. We have an approved, filed subdivision plat. Full stop. That is still a valid and will forever be valid unless an amended subdivision plat is filed, with notations showing what needs to be done with respect to other issues for that lot to make it compliant with health code and other issues. So in terms of vested rights, we may not have taken a tree down yet, but I also haven't studied the historical ownership. Maybe they've been in common ownership for a long time. Maybe I don't know why it wasn't developed, but that doesn't mean that those rights that were granted back in 1989 all of a sudden non-exist.
The point you're raising is a good point, and I just don't know
Right.
enough about
Okay.
that as a legal issue. I know sometimes we give a permit, and if you don't build on something in 2 years, you lose your rights.
Sure, like a building permit.
Right.
Absolutely.
So I don't know what vested rights implies, and I think, for me, I would need our village attorney to opine on that matter, to be able to say, great, let's go forward with that as the interpretation.
Another question, I think, that is probably a question for the village attorney, but also one that you might want to be heard on, is what's the zoning board's authority to rule on this? Because this isn't typical appeal. I mean, on an appeal, we would be looking at the decision and we make a de novo review, putting ourselves in the place of the building inspector. And if the math is right, I don't know that we have a basis as a strict typical appeal saying we would have decided it differently. What you're asking for, and I'm not suggesting it's unreasonable, but I don't know if it's this board or the planning board or the board of trustees that is the proper entity to rule that something, that the record establishes a basis for an exemption from the application of the steep slope law.
All right, I understand your question. I do feel very confident that it is, better or for worse, in your laps and this board's laps to review a determination, whatever it might be, whether it's a use that you would find differently or in this case, looking at the historical context of the determination. I do think the Board of Appeals is the correct administrative body to look at that, but I feel pretty confident in that. Happy to have a discussion with Lori Lee if that is helpful for the board, but I
No,
think,
there's also the section 300-47 non-conforming lots, so that might be something else that might be applicable to this particular application too, that you might want to look into.
It would have to be either one or the other. You know, either this was an approved lot knowingly, and times have changed, standards have changed, so you don't apply ones today because this was already administrated, or it's a pre-existing non-conforming lot. At which point then it's not subject to steep slopes.
But the subdivision didn't pre-exist the code.
Which is the importance of those documents that I gave you, is noting that what happened was the matter was heard in August. Wasn't next heard at the September meeting, the planning board, because the September meeting of the planning board predated Board of Trustees taking action on steep slopes. It was intentionally put off until the Board of Trustees had concluded its adoption of the steep slopes. So they said, we want this subject to the steep slopes. We're going to review it. The planning board did their job. Everybody did what they were supposed to do, and they approved a lot. If I could show a few documents, might be helpful. Granted, the understanding that this might still be going to Laura Lee and Dan Posen, who I think planning board, and also, as you guys know well as I, this is not the end. Let's say you guys say this is all fine and we get to the next step. Anything happening on the site goes to the planning board.
right.
So all the issues that would be of concern in Dobbs Ferry are very well considered.
I would say that you would want to make as complete an application as you can, because we need to know all the facts. You know, we have some of the facts here.
Right.
But, you know, as you keep saying, there's this that's more, and there's that that's more, and, you know, the full context is really what we have, you know, and I think that's why it would make sense to bring Lori Lee in.
Yeah.
You know, I will tell her that you will be in contact with her, because this is as much a legal matter as anything.
It's totally.
And you will need to renotice for next time, if this is part of your appeal.
Okay,
You know, it should be noticed as such.
we can certainly do that. Can I run through these so you'd know, because you might say, is there anything else that you have that shows this? And then we'd know to conclude it. So if I show you all the documentation that we've got, which if I was bringing stuff that we prepared, I would make sure that I submitted copies of it. If I'm using.
If they're all in our packet, we don't need to see them on the screen.
No, this is copies of the documents going through the process with the dates and who signed what and approved what as it evolved. And what.
Back in the 80s.
Back in the 80s. Starts actually in 1931.
That's not part of the, but that hasn't been submitted to the village?
It hasn't been submitted, but we're making a presentation on it, and we provide copies of our PowerPoint for these things. So it becomes the record once it's been presented.
Doesn't it make more sense to have the attorneys consulted, a formal package resubmitted, and noticed properly?
Yes.
But I worked on this all day. I had to
You didn't get an A, okay?
I went and took photographs of the site. You don't want to just have me vastly run through it. My fear is I've got something in here that you've got a question about and you'd like further documentation. And we certainly will provide copies of all these things. They all come from the village.
It's not really relevant to your application, but I'd say your greater fear is rock.
You think
You
there's
know-
rock on that site? It's all rock. The entire
Yes,
site is rock.
yes, and, you know, and can you get utilities?
Yeah.
Sewer, water, you know, you can't move that rock. I mean, when the clubhouse burned down,
Yeah.
we were hammering at a rock for 6 weeks, and we didn't do anything to it. We
Right.
didn't get dust off it. So I would think that you need to be drilling down to see whether you can actually build a house there. I mean, there's such a thing as a buildable lot, and then there's a lot that can be built on. And, I mean, that's just pragmatic
True.
thought.
If you just saw the photos of the site, you'd realize there is a way to build on the site even if you didn't remove rock. Now, the intent of the owner is to take out a lot of rock. And they've had a guy come in and look at it and give cost projections on what it is. I personally I'll put my experience locally up against anyone, having built the houses behind the high school in Irvington. There wasn't a lot, that wasn't a complete demo for taking out tons of rock for every foundation. And sometimes you'd hit that black granite that was impossible to take out, and I'd have to convince somebody you're gonna have a crawl space in this part of your basement.
Well, the house at the end of Beachdale has been under construction for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. They still can't get utilities in.
Okay, there's no, I mean, we've gotten utilities in through anything. It's a matter of cost and willingness to spend the money. You know, we did the same for Rui George on Shady Lane, where it was the house built back behind the other houses, and we had to bring the utilities in.
Yes.
And
Terrible.
And we couldn't remove the rock by
Yeah.
hammering. So
Right.
what we did is we drilled and we used chemicals that expanded and broke the rock. It was expensive, but that's how the utilities got put in. If you are willing to spend the money, you can make most lots. In fact, isn't this the entire reason that we adopted a steep slope ordinance? If you read through all the comments that were made, the board members all commented on how 30 years before, these lots wouldn't have been considered for construction because the means didn't exist yet. Now we have techniques, abilities to take lots that other people had bypassed and say, well, this has actually got great views, it's a beautiful lot. I'm just gonna spend a lot of money to make it buildable. So that's what we found through technology. We can do things that we weren't able to do before. Sometimes that's good.
Your lips
sometimes
to God's ears.
The flip of that, though, is nature has created more rain and more flooding, and that's a problem throughout the village. So steep slope law is one way we can restrict some of that.
Right, and but the other thing that's interesting in our code, and this is kind of off, I understand this.
Anyway.
Is off your purview, the village actually has two steep slopes ordinances. It has one that was adopted in '89, which has to do with diminishing yield from properties. It tandemed with the rectangle ordinance. There was a builder in Dobbs who was finding a 10,000 square foot parcel with a house on it, creating a surgical subdivision that he could fit a house in. And the first law that was adopted was the rectangle ordinance. The next one was this steep slopes ordinance. This steep slopes ordinance was not adopted to make sure we weren't overburdening systems. I happened to have, at that exact moment, had an application pending before the village for Livingston Ridge. And we had proposed 22 units. And they adopted the steep slope ordinance, and at every meeting, the board, the chair, or not the chair, the attorney for the village, in response to my question, is this going to apply to Livingston Ridge? Because we've got standing. We've already spent a lot of money doing stuff to go ahead with this project. He said, no, you'll be grandfathered. All the way up until they adopted the steep slope ordinance, and I got a letter. Please submit documentation on the steep slopes compliance. And I went to the village attorney and I said, aren't you afraid of a lawsuit? Is it safe for me to say this? He wouldn't mind, he'd think it's funny. He said, you think I'm afraid of a lawsuit? I've got 5 kids to put through college. So, so what they made us do is do all the stuff, and I was piqued enough about it that I determined how many units could be built at Livingston Ridge, and we amended our application. We came in for 24 units. It increased our yield by 2. So that's, it was, a lot of people didn't really know how this was gonna work, and it was about yield. The other section of the code talks about 35% and says you should avoid building on 35% slope. And that's what we have carefully managed to show we can do. If I was presenting the things I worked on all day. But I can understand the need perhaps to wait till the next meeting to show those to you.
Yeah, let's also ask, is there anyone out in Zoom land that would wish to be heard or here? Yeah, if you'd speak into the mic so that the record picks up your name and your comments.
Hi, everyone. I'm Heather Lustig. I'm the owner with my husband Larry here of 77 North Mountain, property just uphill to the lot. And I think we're just here really to learn about the process. We are worried about the hill and the rock and what the building and erosion that could happen there. With the rain, stuff is coming down the hill already onto North Mountain. It is just the whole environment. We bought the house because it's on a large lot. Our next door neighbors, of course, the Bernsteins, who own the lot, the whole lot. Most of the houses, actually starting with the Reichs, are all on over an acre up the hill and up to the club. And we are concerned about the continuous kind of dividing, the changing of what is a historic property area in Dobbs. We certainly understand folks wanting to live in the neighborhood and don't want to be unreasonable, but we're also kind of concerned about what it's going to do to how we live and how close that house is going to be to what is our private area of our house. It's right up to gazebo at the back of the Bernstein's house, where this house would come up to that level with our view and where we look at the property. I think, saying all those things, I'm trying to think if I forgot anything else, Larry. And so what we're here, part of it is to learn the process and understand and also get a feeling for what that would be like and how it will impact us and our neighbors. My husband is a physician. As you know, the access up the mountain is tricky and skinny, and so having to get to the hospital, I'm also worried about the obstruction to get up to her home. There are also 2 other physicians on the road too. And that's just another thing that I'm concerned about. And anything else I think that's what we'll just share.
Okay, thank you very much.
It's brother's man.
Right.
It's a tricky road.
I think maybe we should close that. Yeah.
Good idea.
You guys all done?
I don't know if there's other members in Zoom land.
Apparently not.
Okay. So I'm reading the tea leaves correctly. You'd like us to come back at the next meeting. I will coordinate with Lori Lee and bring this couple of the topics up. I believe you will as well, or do you want me to take that?
Yeah,
I'll contact.
Dan
Yeah.
and I can coordinate with Lori Lee
Yeah.
as to what the zoning board's looking for.
Is this actually Lori Lee or this weekend?
Most likely it'll probably be Lori Lee.
Maybe both?
Yes.
They'll decide.
Well, yeah, they'll decide. They're from the same
know
firm.
that-
I don't
Yeah.
want, but I'm trying to avoid the point to a bunch of stuff for Lee on this, then we get planning board. Dan
No,
can
they'll
coordinate.
coordinate it. They'll coordinate. And we'll make sure it gets.
And to be clear, your intent is to not ask for a variance. Your intent is to ask for overturning the determination of the building inspector.
We will be asking for both since we're renoticing. The intention this evening was to ask this board to overturn building department's inspector's determination. In the future, in the alternative, our argument will be if you decide not to overturn that determination, seek that 23% variance to allow this to be a buildable lot.
Recognizing that this is pretty unique. It's not, like, I've been at the meetings with some of the others where we've got one piece of property that three different people over the last 20 years tried to get approved. The last time they were actually close. And the guy,
If they had come back one more time, they would have been there.
and he,
He said, nope, not gonna do it.
yeah,
I'm not gonna listen.
which I think probably was good, so.
Yeah, it was good.
And for the village.
Yeah,
Just
right.
a point of curiosity, the current owner, when did he or she buy the property?
Years ago. I actually don't.
Is the applicant the owner, or is the contract ND?
No, the applicant is
Okay, move to close?
I'll second that.
All in favor? Okay,
Thank you very much.
thank you. See you next time.
Over a dull month.
Yeah, but anything that's on there should have been in the package.
Are there other issues, or it's just?
I